Good afternoon, everyone. Can you raise your hand if there's a seat available next to you so people can find a space to sit? Also, if you do not find a seat inside, we have the screens down in the Fireside Lounge, and we will also turn it on in the Park View Lounge, the B1 TV room for people.
I think we can start promptly at 4. Bob was trying to steal my agenda. So get your own agenda, Bob. Yeah, he's just trying to embarrass me because he thinks I'm always late, which I guess I am. I'm usually late. It's so nice to see everybody. Hi, Deanna. We have a new format for the annual meeting this year, and we have invited a number of our professional services partners that we're working with on the West Wing Tower. Sawgrass does all our financial modeling. Ziegler will set up our financing. And there are other other partners, but those are the two that are represented here in person today. We're going to have a few presentations and leave as much time as humanly possible for questions. And we're skipping all of the introductions this year since there aren't too many new people except for Ronnie Budge, the new president of the Residents Council. Go, Ronnie. I think with that, the only other retirement, well, there's a retirement that Gary's going to speak to, and there's one other change in the executive committee of the board. We had Janelle Turner, who was our vice president, and she needed to prioritize some other personal things going on in her life, so she decided to step down from the board. And we are so happy that Marcia Almquist has agreed to step up as vice president of the board. So I'm looking forward to a lot of mentorship from her. I admire her a lot, and she has such amazing experience, including with construction of huge development projects. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Gary. And I'm Alex Tibbetts, if I didn't say that, if anybody is new. And if there's anyone who wants to speak with me, last year I had outreach from a couple of children of residents who happened to be here for last year's meeting, and I had so much fun having lunch with them and with some of the residents as well. So please feel free to email me afterwards if anyone would like to connect. And here's Gary.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's good to be here again for this annual meeting. We have someone that we want to honor this afternoon who served as Residents Council President for 3 years and served on the board Residents Council for 2 years, 3 years, and 2 years on the Board of Trustees. Right. This is what we talked about yesterday. So yeah, okay, 3 years as president, 2 years as president, and 2 years on the Board of Trustees, but just a member of the Residents Council. We got it, okay. And so, more importantly, she comes from New York City, one of my favorite places in the whole country, and especially Brooklyn. And so, Deanna, why don't you come on up here for a second? I want to say a few nice things about you. So Deanna and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other over the 2 years that she served on the Board of Trustees. I was her mentor. She may have been actually my mentor, but a couple things that you need to know about Diana is that she's a fierce supporter of this place. And I use the word fierce. So she loves this place, and she loves you. And she also has brought what I would call a New York sensibility to getting things done and questions answered. And I'm grateful for that. And so when I first worked for Plymouth Healing Communities, one of my least favorite people was the auditor. And because as a nonprofit, you always had to go through an audit every year. And it was painful for the first couple years, but you get to know your auditors, you get to know what the important service they provide safety and insurance, and that's what Deanna has provided to this community by her time on the Board of Trustees. And so I am deeply grateful for the years that you gave to the board, and I also know that you are going to be engaged over the next several years as we move towards construction and that. What I love about Deanna is that she's not afraid of asking a tough question. And if she doesn't get an answer, she'll ask it again. And so I actually wish she was part of the White House press corps right now. I really do, because there's a lot of questions I have, and I really wish they were being answered right now. So for your years of service and to the Residents' Council, for 2 years as president, another year as a member, and 2 years, this is higher math, and no wonder, and 2 years on the Board of Trustees. Thank you so much, and we have a gift for you.
Thank you.
And this is, in case people are wondering, there is it's Crystal, keepsake, thanking her for her years of service, but also a gift certificate to the Fifth Avenue Theater to see a show. And so, thank you. A round of applause for her. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, much as Bob has tried to put me behind, we are on time so far. And the next people up are Bob and Christy are going to together do a year-end financial review with Sawgrass and Ziegler. But there's going to be a lot of questions out here, so I'm going to come up with a cane to pull you guys off in. How much time should we give them? Okay, see if you can do it in 5 minutes, and if you can't, I'll give you an extra 5, but that's it.
Thank you, Alex. Well, I was planning on doing this in 5 minutes, and I also know that Bob asked me to do it on his behalf, too. So, unless you'd like to come up, Bob. Okay. All right. Wow, great to see such a great turnout tonight. Wow. So I'm just really quick. I'm just going to give a quick overview of where we ended 2024. There we go. Yeah, some quick financial metrics that we track here. Net operating margin, one of them. That's kind of what's reflected in our chart here, even though it's a little bit squeezed. It looks like it was quite the climb. The red dotted line is our budget. That was a 5.3% margin, as we approved for the 2025-4 budget. And the purple line is where we ended up if we don't include all of the West Tower expenses that we need to expense per accounting rules. So we did a little bit better, so we're at a 5.9% margin compared to that 5.3% that we had budgeted. The blue line, however, is our all-in budget. Those are the West Tower sales and marketing expenses that we needed to pay for and account for as expenses. And therefore, you can see it's less than a 1% margin for the year. We talked about this when we built the 2025 budget, how we used the monthly service fee and the margins built into that, and that difference was what we used to pay for the sales and marketing expenses for 2024. So our overall margin is going to be under 1%. These are pre-audit numbers, so they are subject to change, but they shouldn't change that much. A couple other metrics that we measure, days cash on hand. So we know that we've been spending cash. We have master planning projects going on. We're paying for the pre-construction for the West Tower. Those things are drawing down our cash. So we still are at 710 days cash on hand. That is still about the 75th percentile or higher of all single-site light plan communities. So still a very healthy number, even though it's been coming down. Another metric that we measure is our debt service coverage ratio. How much income do we bring in compared to the annual debt service that we have? And we are over 2 times our annual debt service. So that is also a very healthy number for a life plan community, single site particularly. That, so a couple other things I wanted to mention. The board, just at the meeting prior to this, approved the endowment earnings distribution for 2024. And not a surprise, we also, as we did last year, they approved a 25% of those earnings going to the resident council to help fund the Monday market loss in revenue when we do have to transition it out of the West Wing. That's about $91,000. In addition, another 25% of the earnings, excuse me, are dedicated to the art committee so that they can help start planning for what we need in the West Tower. Again, another $91,000 there. The rest of the earnings paid for resident assistance, scholarship funds, enrichment grants, those kinds of things. So pretty much reserving half of the unrestricted earnings for those 2 items, and the rest was released for expenses that we have already incurred. Today we're going to hear a lot about the West Tower. We have some experts up here who are going to talk about the West Tower. But quickly, before we get to that, about the West Wing transition, right? So we have been actively moving residents out of the West Wing for the last 2 years. Here we are in January of 2025. Hard to believe. We are down to 6 households in the West Wing who have not selected an apartment yet. That means we have relocated 29 households. We have 8 more who are still in the West Wing that have committed to another apartment, and we have 6 households remaining to find a new home between now and hopefully the middle of the year, maybe a little bit sooner. So doing great work there. Also, as we think about decommissioning the West Wing, I know there's a lot of questions about what will happen to the operations of various items, Monday market, all of those things. Those are operational questions. They are not board questions. But we will be having a meeting in March, both with Anderson to talk about the construction logistics and how it works on their side, as well as with Horizon House staff on how the operational pieces will work. So we're working through that. We're having lots of conversations with different resident groups to understand what works best for them. We should have that plan mostly put together by March so that we can get implementing that. All right. I'm done. Perfect. So
Okay, we'll make sure we get to that. Did everyone hear that? She wants to know if Horizon House generally and our project specifically are affected by Trump freezing things. So yeah, we'll make sure that gets addressed. Okay, so now we have 2 presentations. One is by Sawgrass and one is by Ziegler. What's the minimum time that you need for the stand and deliver portion of it?
6.5 minutes.
Okay, so we got 6.5 minutes for stand and deliver. And here you go.
Perfect.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Meehan with Sawgrass Partners, along with my colleagues Mark Stryker and Jake Slavic right there. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. So we're going to give you just about 4 or 5 slides of an update on the West Tower project, as well as some of the what are the key activities that will be happening this year in 2025. There'll be a lot going on. And then at the end, we'll talk about some of the risk mitigation strategies. I know that everyone here, that's top of their line, and we will make sure that we address that as well. So before we get into that, I think it's good to note here that there's an experienced senior living development team that's been assembled by the board and management. The board taking the lead, Erica, Christy, and Lori from a management standpoint. And then our role as Sawgrass Partners, just briefly, we're from Chicago, but we have over 100 years combined experience doing just nonprofit senior living development financings. We've financed over $2 billion worth of financings across the country. So I think that, when we look at, this is the only thing we do working from Montana to Florida to New York and Seattle as well. But I think the other thing to note here is you look at the team that's been assembled, there's a combination of both local as well as national folks from a project development team. You look at your design build firms with Anderson and Methune, they're both local here. Forvis is going to be a feasibility consultant, a third-party feasibility consultant. When we talk about risk mitigation, they are going to basically do an audit of the financial feasibility of this project, both from reasonableness of assumptions as well as the market work as well. Zembrunnen is a third-party construction monitor. The bondholders will require that there's a third-party monitor that looks at the construction, that approves the draw requests. Once again, another mitigation strategy from their standpoint. Vanner, once again, is another local owner's rep that's working on behalf of Horizon House, protecting their interests. Love & Company is a national sales and marketing firm that's been just brought on to help from the sales and marketing standpoint. And then my colleagues here, or friends here from Ziegler, Sarkis, and Darren, leading the investment banking, and I'll let them talk about their roles in a few minutes. So where are we in this process? I think it's important to note where we are and maybe look back briefly of where we've been. So the board has taken a logical, disciplined approach to the development of this project. There's been milestones and check-in points along the way. We're back here, looking at 2025, but this project really started, even when we got involved in 2022, but even before that, when the board, looked at it from a strategic standpoint. And I think the key thing to note here is we just didn't get here. There was multiple schemes that were analyzed along the way, taking into consideration facilities, construction, market, financial feasibility. And so where we're at today here is really in 2025, and my next slide will talk about a lot of the key activities that will be happening here in 2025. But I think the other thing to note here is this project will be done here in 2032. It'll be a 10-year process by the time it's conceived, by the time we get it constructed and filled up. There's a 40-month construction period and a 36-month fill-up period. So these projects have a long gestation period here, but I want you all folks to know that it's just there's been a process to get to this point today, and multiple, like I say, check-in points along the way from a board, management, and leadership standpoint. So what are the key things that will be happening here in 2025? There's really 4 categories: permits and entitlements. So one of the things prior to starting financing, we will need to secure our master use permit and our construction permits, both from a demo of the West Wing as well as the construction permits for the West Tower. So we'll be continuing, we're in that process right now. We've received comments on the master use permit. We're responding to those comments and making sure that we incorporate that from a design standpoint. The sales and marketing, once again, we're ongoing with our market education. We're wrapping up a market education of not just what life plan communities, but getting out there the word of Horizon House. Increasing our lead generation, once again, bringing Love on board and helping in those 2 areas. And then the key, and one of those prerequisites to financing, is achieving the acceptable pre-sale level for financing. That's when the bond markets look at that, how do you get market acceptance? And market acceptance is getting 10% deposits on those units. I believe right now we have 75 right now. So that's where we're at currently. From a design and construction standpoint, we are in the construction document phase right now. We need to have construction documents prior to securing a guaranteed maximum price contract from our design builder. Obviously, the further along in design, the less, the less contingency we have, because those documents get further and further completed. So we are in the process of getting those construction documents complete, and then we will then price those out with a guaranteed maximum price contract. In the interim, we are going to do a 50%, once the documents are 50% complete, we will do a price check at 50% complete, just based on, I'm sure folks have heard that there's been some changes in the administration and some tariffs and other things that have been happening. So it's a wise decision here to get those documents to a certain point that we can price those out and see what the impact is from a project budget standpoint. And then lastly, the one thing at the end there is getting is securing our financing. So as part of that process, from a financing standpoint, I discussed the financial feasibility study. Well, the financial feasibility study by that third-party firm, Sarkis and his team will market and sell the bonds, and then we will close the bonds, fund the project, and begin construction. Lastly, so our last topic then is kind of our risk mitigation strategies. What is the board, what is management, what is the project development team put in place to help us mitigate those risks in this process? So I think from a sales and marketing standpoint, you'll see we have an experienced internal team as well as an external team that's helping monitor those metrics and refining our strategies. And I think the other thing that's key is, we have an accepted existing product here today. We have an existing reputation, and I think the product that we are developing has been accepted as well. So I think those are the things that when we look at it from a sales standpoint, and we have that pre-sale target that we're going to reach. From a construction standpoint, once again, we have an experienced team there from a design build, a local design build team that's done this here. We're going to have internal and external representation, both from Vanner and Zimbrunnin, to monitor that construction process. And then, we're going to have a guaranteed maximum price contract that's going to have the appropriate provisions in there when you look at it from an insurance standpoint, liquidated damages, contingencies, we're going to have subcontractor default insurance. There's going to be a bunch of provisions in the construction document protecting Horizon House. So when things, if and when they do go wrong, we have the appropriate coverages there. And that's one of the things that Sarkis will talk to as well, that the bond market's going to require as well. And then from a financing standpoint, we have, our folks here in Seattle. We're lucky enough to have folks that, they do this, their firm does this nationally. They're in the leader when you talk about senior living financing. The other thing is, Horizon House has been in the market today. They have rated bonds today, so they're a known entity from a capital market standpoint. And I think the other thing that we're looking to act, and I don't want to steal Sarkis' thunder. There's some strategies based on the new administration's tax plan that we are looking at ways to mitigate some of those things related to private activity bonds. And I'm not going to steal Sarkis' thunder. He will discuss that a little bit more. But we know that there's a known potential risk that this funding may potentially go away as part of the new the new budget. But we are working as a development team to mitigate that risk and making sure that we have the appropriate provisions in place that if that does happen, we could secure financing here in 2025. And then the last thing is just from an operational standpoint. I think, Chrissy just gave a summary of 2024 performance, but we have an experienced leadership team here, an experienced board. And one of the things is, you financially are in a position to execute on this project based on the financial position that management and the board has put you in today. So you are in a position of strength to execute this plan. And like I say, it's kudos to Erica and Christy and Lori and the whole management team to be able to do that. And I think the other key thing for us is using prudent assumptions. We could set aggressive goals, but we also like to plan prudently. So if someone says, Kevin, why are you assuming a 36-month fill-up of this? Well, we're doing that because we want to make sure that we have prudent assumptions. The same thing when you look at our revenue and expense assumptions. And once again, these will all be validated. The reasonableness of the assumptions that are in the financial model will be validated by a third-party firm to determine the reasonableness of those assumptions. And once again, that document is then utilized by Sarkis and his team then to market and sell the bonds. And bondholders will tell us whether those are reasonable assumptions as well. I am done. I don't know if that was.
Thank you so much. That was 6.5. It was about 9.5. But pretty good. I'm going to say pretty good because Beth had budgeted 15, so I've got them on a roll. I want to keep it fast and interesting for everyone because I thought you did a great job, Kevin, but I've heard it for about the 15th time. So I want to hear the questions that emerge from the group, from the residents. who may not have heard it so many times. So Kevin was our development advisor, and this is our financing partner. Sarkis, thank you so much. How much time do you need?
I can be really quick and just say ditto because you did such a great job. But I won't do that. I can be done in 10 minutes. 10 to 12. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is always a great day to be at Horizon House. My name is Sarkis Garabedian. I'm right here in Seattle, and I've been in this business for 20 years. My partner is Darren Bell, also here in Seattle with me. And we work exclusively with not-for-profit senior living organizations up and down the West Coast as part of our team, and then nationally through our firm Ziegler, who's headquartered in Chicago and is far and away the leader in this space each and every year. A long way of saying it's very important to us, this market segment, and helping ensure project success. And how do we do that? So there's certainly some overlap here in terms of some of the elements that we try to make sure to really safeguard risks and make sure a project's going to be successful. Kevin certainly hit on a lot of those. We want to make sure that we have what we call the three legs of the stool, and that is the market, the financial side, and the construction side all marry up together to create a successful project. So as was mentioned, we've been at this for a while now in terms of planning and getting through several go, no-go decisions. And we've been we're moving right along and are now seeking to finance this project this year as these elements are all lining up. So on the market side, well, certainly we're leaning into what you've already built here at Horizon House. Have an excellent reputation in Seattle, been here over 60 years. And now we're building the new West Tower, and we are in the middle of pre-sales of seeking new depositors at 10% deposits. So that's how we're really trying to, at this point, validate beyond what we already know, the proof of concept of Horizon House in terms of the market. The financial analysis so far has been performed by Sawgrass, and that is making sure that with reasonable assumptions, we have strong financial metrics all along the way. And we have definitely checked that box. The project-related side is working through construction and trying to get to that guaranteed maximum price construction contract. That is, locking in a contract with all their subs, making sure it has a lid on it and can't go higher, and fits within our overall budget and total financial model. So to make sure that all three of those fit together, I'm happy to say that they do right now in terms of our overall forecast here for the West Tower. So from where we sit today, the essential elements to get access to capital, we are really looking at these three columns. The construction related, continuing to work through with our contracting partners to lock in that construction contract. Furthering our estimates all along the way as that works through design to lock in that contract with a contractor known as a guaranteed maximum price construction contract or a GMP. And then also making sure that when we go to financing that we've gotten through we'll have permits when we need them, that they're ready to go. We're not looking for more approvals from any third parties in order to get permits that would stop construction. Another very important element. The one that I really focus on right now too is with marketing. I mentioned the 10% pre-sales. That's something we want to make sure that we keep going, has a good pace as we seek to finance later this year. And then on the right is working through the documents. That's really our job to make sure that we get all the troops together, get the attorneys turned on to really produce the preliminary official statement or prospectus to market the bonds, work through all the necessary approvals in order to be able to market this transaction. That process takes 3 to 4 months. And we're hoping all this comes together around October in terms of our total timeline. The next slide walks through that finance process and timeline. So the total finance process, once we start and pull all the participants together, the ones that Kevin walked through, that takes 3 to 4 months from really start to finish. We haven't gotten those folks going yet because we don't want to spend a bunch of money on attorneys until we're a little further into design. We have some more pre-sales, and we have a good sight line to being about 4 months to getting a shovel in the ground. So that's when we'll get all those parties together, all the various attorneys, get the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, et cetera, ready to walk through this process. It really has 4 key phases. One is the organizational phase. So that is when we walk through and finalize our total finance plan and have that third-party audit that is mentioned, the feasibility consultant. We then work through documents. That takes about 2 months. Lots of paper, lots of review. It really all culminates into a preliminary official statement, or known as a prospectus, to market the bonds. Once we have approval by the board here of Horizon House to launch forward into marketing and have that pulled together, we would then be in the marketing phase, where we would actually be marketing these transactions to investors all across the country. As was mentioned, Horizon House is effectively public today. We issued bonds in 2017. Is happy to say worked on that transaction and led it here for Horizon House. So you're already a known entity on the national stage in the capital markets. You have investors that we'll walk through in a moment. You have regular investor calls to keep up investor relations, and we're going to lean into that investor base and more to finance the West Tower. So there would be a process of the marketing where we would actually do a live investor webinar. We would have site visits with investors here, many who've already been here, and work through marketing in that transaction to sell the bonds. And then we're on to closing, which is mostly paperwork at that point. So there's a question about Trump already. I didn't think it would take long for that to happen. One of the things that really is a direct impact to our business and is keeping a renewed focus on financing in 2025 is the threat to tax exemption. So if you haven't heard this yet, you're going to hear more about it in the news. Of course, you're hearing there's going to be a tax bill. The tax cuts sunset this year that Trump put in his first administration. They're going to seek to extend those tax cuts. To extend those tax cuts, they have to find ways to pay for them or find those various pay-fors. Not just for the current tax cuts, all the other things they want to do as well. Lower the corporate tax rate to 15%, maybe not tax overtime, et cetera, et cetera. They have to find ways to make that work in terms of math. We could be one of those. In fact, in 2017, the initial bill included a full repeal of private activity bonds, which is bonds issued by nonprofits like Horizon House. Would have repealed and removed our ability to issue bonds in the tax-exempt bond market. And that is our primary avenue for transactions like this. So we know that we're safe through 2025. It is unknown after that. And for that very reason, we're keeping a focus on financing and having a go-to-market strategy in 2025. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A. So I'm going to shift more to Horizon House's situation in terms of their credit profile, which is very strong in our sector. So for life plan communities or CCRCs, only about 20% in the country, and there's about 2,000 life plan communities across the country, only about 20% of those carry a bond rating at all. Most of them are non-rated and still issue bonds on a non-rated basis. Horizon House does have a rating. Horizon House rating is BB plus actually. So they're in that column in the bottom right, which means Horizon House is already a high performer in our capital markets of having a bond rating at all. You can see that we have roughly 160 total ratings across the country, and most of those are in that BBB to BB category. And they're actually capped in the A category. You cannot be above A in our sector, according to Fitch. No more AAs, only A. So Horizon House is already a BB plus rating category. Who are your investors? Names you hear on TV, names you hear on the radio. Capital Group is in Los Angeles. They're your largest investor. They're here on the West Coast. We like to have them involved in our transactions. You notice big names, Vanguard, the largest investor in our space, BlackRock, other big names. So you really have already a strong investor base here of your outstanding 2017 bonds. This gives you a great base from which to build upon for the West Tower. And all of these investors know the West Tower is coming. It's been described on the investor calls. They are aware about the transaction coming, and they are here for it. Shifting to the metrics, Chrissy did a great job walking through those, and this just looks at some of the key metrics. Debt service coverage ratio was mentioned on the top left. So with turnover entrance fees on the top left, on the far right without entrance fees, so that's just day-to-day cash flow. All above the lines there. The lines are those Fitch medians, which is the leading rating industry in our sector. So very strong in terms of debt service coverage ratio, how many times over you can make your debt service payments. Shifting to the balance sheet in the bottom, looking at your cash reserves, also very strong, as measured by days cash on hand and cash to debt. All the while, we talk about how these projects takes 10 years from start to finish, all the while taking the financial hit to empty the West Wing. So being proactive in order to take the steps that's needed to have reduced income over the last few years to be able to take on this project. And you can see the hit in terms of the balance sheet that's eroded by taking some income and some production off in terms of the West Wing. So in other words, management and the board was proactive to be able to do this at all. Many organizations wait too long, and they don't have the capacity to wait 3 years to empty a tower and build a new one. So good planning overall, and are putting themselves in a strong position to be able to take this project on this year in terms of a financing event. Now we know that not all there is risk to projects, right? There's risk to anything in life. Ziegler, as I mentioned at the outset, we are the leading financier to senior living projects. Every year we put out default study because we want to learn what's happened, right? What's wrong? What could we learn from in terms of mistakes, okay? So this is an excerpt from our 2024 default study, and it just shows you what types of projects generally default. Generally, it's new communities or new campuses that have no existing operations at all. And I think that kind of makes sense, right? Most new businesses fail. You don't have proof of concept. You don't have 60 years of operating history like Horizon House. So on the right, you see the chart 11, 49% of the par amount of debt that has defaulted are startup or new campus communities. And so what we call greenfields or new campuses, those are generally the ones that have the most defaults, almost half of the entire issuance. In addition, defaults predominantly have been tied to organizations that have a high degree of refundable contracts. Horizon House has been working those down. They're aged communities that have not reinvested and have a high degree of skilled nursing. Does that sound like Horizon House? I don't think so. And so I know there's been an article that's gone around New York Times as well, getting a lot of attention. I'm just going to say a few things about that, about Harborside. Okay, very unfortunate situation. Had a lot of strikes against it, right? Well, first of all, it opened in 2010, right? New community, so on this list, new community default. It opened in 2010, right in the teeth of the Great Recession, was already behind, right? It's also in the highly regulated state of New York. Lots of regulations protecting residents there. I would say they didn't do a good job here, right? So they did turn down a sale that would have kept all resident refunds whole. They actually rejected the sale. They're now trying to save face and make the new purchaser actually step up and make whole the refunds that are now in default. They should have done it the first time. They also, every time they wanted to change a contract and react to the market and sell people what they wanted, they had to get approval from New York State. Takes a very long time to get approval to even change a contract. So a long way of saying that those regulations in New York State, one of the most regulated states in terms of our business, did not prevent that default, or many others that have happened in New York. In Washington, we've not had a default like that. So those are some of the key aspects of Harborside. The timing in which open had a lot, and also had a high degree of refundable contracts. They had $100 million in refunds due. Also, because of regulations, they had to be paid within 12 months no matter what. No matter what your cash position was, no matter if you resold the unit, the regulation said you have to pay that refund. Well, what does that mean? Deplete your cash reserves, right? Run on the bank. So those are all factors that really played a role in Harborside. There's always more to the story, but those are facts. And that's what played a role in that default, and we're happy to take questions later. And that is my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You also did a great job, and thank you guys for being here. I think to wrap it up, I'm just going to ask Bob George to come up and recap in his words what we've heard so far, what are the big headlines, and what are the big decisions that the board will need to make this year.
Hi, everyone. You guys did a great job. I have to say that. My name's Bob George. I am your treasurer. So I am the chair of the Finance Committee and the Audit Committee. And I've been on the board for 9 years. And I had the privilege of coming on board from Mr. Bob Klein, who recruited me to the Finance Committee several years before I joined the board. One thing I'd like you to know with respect to this project, for 10 years in my career, I was the chief financial officer and then the group head of an organization that built power plants around the world. From New Jersey to California, the Dakotas to Texas. And the reason actually that I'm here now is we were building a very large power plant in Sydney, Australia. And our corporate headquarters at the time was in Pennsylvania. And we had a very large engineering, procurement, construct group headquartered here in Redmond. And so the corporation moved me and my family out here back in the 1990s, 95, 96, something like that. So I have a fairly extensive amount of experience in projects of this size, this magnitude, and maybe even more complex than this. In addition to that, after leaving Azurin Industries, I joined Esterline technologies here in Seattle. And under the group that I was with at that point in time, we grew Esterline from a couple $100 million a year in revenue to over $2 billion. And my financing experience there is measured in the billions of dollars. And at that point in time, I got to Esterline. Mr. Klein was on our audit committee. So if you all have any questions about any of that, you can go to Bob Klein and ask him. With respect to this project, these guys have done a great job of explaining to you the process. I just want to let you know that from my perspective and my experience, best practices have been followed in this process right from the very beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean when the board was evaluating strategic options for Horizon House. It was a very detailed strategic plan. Right from the time when Sarah came on board as CEO, and then Mike, and now Erica. And we did a very detailed analysis of the options for Horizon House. And as all of you know, and as has been pointed out by Sarkis, oh, sorry. I'm getting guidance now from Beth, who gives guidance to everyone. And very good guidance, by the way. So we did a very detailed analysis of the options. And as Sarkis has pointed out, this is not a new project for Horizon House, the organization. Horizon House has grown over the years from the time that UCC opened Horizon House back in 1959 or 60. And if you go back and track through, approximately every 10 years, and you could almost set your calendar by it, Horizon House has made a major investment in the infrastructure of the organization, and we benefit from that today. During that strategic plan, we evaluated options within Horizon House. Should we expand outside of our core area? Should we buy something else? Should we merge with something else? Should we partner with someone else? Jim Fitzgerald and I looked at a number of options around here. The Terry Ann Apartments, for instance, we looked at that option. We looked at others as well. We got to the point where our best option was the one that we're doing now. Moving beyond that, making that decision, we then put together a group of the best advisors and consultants we could find. You've heard most of them. I'm not going to go through them. What I'm saying here is that most important, we're really excited about this opportunity. We know it's going to be disruptive to everyone, okay? There's no question about that. We're going to be doing the best we can to minimize that. I think the clearest cut example of that is relocating all of our residents within the envelope of Horizon House from the west wing. That has added 3 years to this project. We wanted to allow enough time for people to be able to select their new home inside of Horizon House. And now we're to the point where, as Christy said, we're down to 6 households looking for their home inside here. And we're ready to execute on the project. We've got the best advisors, the best coordination, and we're ready to execute. And that's why we're so excited about this process. And with that, I'll turn that over to Alex. And I'll take any questions at the end, but right now, Alex is ready.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. I was just realizing he was the only one I didn't time bound. I didn't ask him, well, how long is this going to take you exactly? But you really came in great just at 5 minutes. Thank you guys so much. I think with that, I could say more, but I think it's best to have this be a two-way conversation, because anything that I could come up with on the top of my head, I'm sure some of you might be already thinking, and there might be questions that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. Hi.
Hi.
Eric and I are going to co-host the rest. So we have the right person answering each question.
This is directed at Sawgrass. One of your bullet points said ongoing lead generation, and those are words that I've heard used in various contexts. Can you just clarify?
I can, I'll get it started. So lead generation, the way we're thinking about that is really our sales and marketing partner is Love and Company. And so we have a budget for marketing, and the marketing generates the leads. The leads come into marketing, and then the lead, if it's high quality, if it's not a bot, if it's a real person that's really interested, then we engage with them and we find out what they're looking for and if we're the right match for them.
I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to operate our Q&A session, because we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to get their questions answered, because all that's standing between you and this wonderful reception is questions. So we're going to go section by section. We have several people around the room and with mics, and so we'll go section by section and we'll call it out. And in order to make sure that these questions are focused on governance, any operational questions we are going to answer at next week's small group session, which is next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So it's not that we don't want to answer it, but we want to have this time for governance. We had 2 people who submitted questions earlier. Well, we had 3. One of the questions was about the disruption during the West Tower being built, as well as the decommissioning of West Wing. That is operational. We have a presentation that's set up in March that's going to go over that. But we did have 2 governance-related questions that I want to be able to answer and read and answer so that we can then take questions from the general community. The first one was from Jim Spraker. It said, will the market support the new building? Skyline is only at 70% in its main building, and the Olympic Tower is not full. Murano is a different model and is not anywhere near full. Horizon House is taking a huge risk. What are the plans to mitigate this risk? And I'm going to have Alex answer this question.
We did our homework. So first we were validating, is it true? Like, what are the fill-up rates of our neighbors? And we have Murano is at 68% for independent living. Skyline's at 92% for the Cascade Tower, which is their original building, and 82% for Olympic Tower, their newer building. We have 75 deposits now. We need more deposits. And so we're really focused on generating momentum and more demand for the project. We will know before we go to financing, have we achieved that momentum? So really all of our focus right now is on generating that momentum. We could do similar to some of these towers and we might still be okay. We want to do better though. Like, we want to be the first best choice for people who are looking for, I don't know, pick the one word you would think of that would describe here. Ronnie at lunch told me unpretentious, which I like because I live in a very unpretentious neighborhood. But you pick, like, why do people want to live here? Do you all believe more than anybody that, like, this does have a strong value prop to the right audience? And I think it's really up to you and me and the rest of the board and the entire staff to help generate that demand. And we have upgraded our sales and marketing partner. We have new material in market already. My husband said he heard us on NPR this week and he really liked the way it sounded. It came across with the right tone. I didn't hear it yet actually, but I'm told it was really good. And so I put a challenge to the rest of the board today at our board meeting that before the Super Bowl next Sunday, I want them to send me a screenshot of some marketing that they've done to their community. Who have they emailed? What networks have they tapped into? Have they posted on social media? Because when you reach out to people, you do find, you don't always know who it's going to be. So my experience with this recently was I posted to Microsoft Old Timers. And I have had multiple people reach out to me since then that wanted to know more. One person was for a parent who needed assisted living. Another person was 57 and is looking for something in about 5 years. And then another person that I'm still following up with. But I think that it's going to take that kind of stick-to-itiveness by not only our sales and marketing partner, but all of us. So I put that challenge to you guys too, and I can send you what I put on social media. I'll post it on my regular one. But I would love it if everybody would try to engage someone in your life, and do you think it's gonna work? And I think we really need not just the quantitative of how much does the direct mail cost, how much are we gonna spend on events, how many people can we generate, but there's some qualitative feedback. I think all of you can help us assess what is the market demand and even generate the market demand.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, our second question came from Carly Swift, and she says she recently heard about the grants awarded annually by the Community Relations and Diversity Committee. This program sounds terrific. It seems to align with Horizon House's value while also building a positive reputation in the community, and she wants to learn more. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to come up here because we have some people watching on YouTube, and they will not be able to hear or see your response if you're not up here. Jim heads our Community Relations and Diversity Committee.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
I would say put it.
Can you hear me?
I think they want you to do like.
Oh, okay. All right. I get it. The board, first of all, Jim Yerby, Chair of the Community Relations and Diversity Committee. The board allocates annually $50,000 for the committee to accomplish its purpose. And I think a second part of the question was whether the grant-making process that we do qualifies Horizon House for its 501c3 status. And the answer is no, it does not. We have a grant-making process from the board's Community Relations and Diversity Committee, and $50,000 is allocated each year. The committee nominates organizations from the community that each person believes would meet the purpose of the Community Relations and Diversity Committee and the board's objectives of outreach to the community. The committee has two primary criteria for judging applications. One is the service to community, senior serving communities, and the other is JEDI principles, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The committee receives the applications and then evaluates based on that criteria that I just told you. The organizations also provides opportunities for Horizon House residents to volunteer. And we haven't done we haven't done the job that we should do in making that known to our residents. So we plan to do more. We started out giving grant awards of $5,000, and we did that for a number of years. We used to give 10 awards of $5,000. Last year, we reconsidered that because of the lack of impact that $5,000 will have. So we decided to do $10,000. That will give us 4 awards for $40,000. And then we also are trying to put Horizon House name before the community. So we'll use $8,000 for outreach to the community, for supporting activities that we believe that would make an impact on the community and know more about Horizon House. We've already accepted the grant awardees for 2025, but because we haven't notified the agencies, we will not at this time announce the awards. But I'd like to give you some idea of the types of organizations that have received grant awards before. Central Area Senior Center, I said or should have said that one of the primary targets for grants, organizations that serves seniors. Atlantic Street Center, another long-standing organization in the community. The Black Community Building Collective, Bellwether Housing, and a treehouse that serves kids. That gives you some idea of our targets, agencies that we present the grant awards to.
Thank you so much, Jim. All right, so now we are going to open it up for questions. And what I will do is I will give the question to the person who can answer it the best. So, please.
We have one here, Mr. Jones.
I'm going to divert from the West Tower and just say that, like many of us here, the elevators in the Central Tower are looking at the end of their life expectancy. Is there any plan to replace those elevators? Because I understand they could be very expensive.
Bill, that is an operational question, so we will make sure that we answer that in the small group sessions next week.
I'm looking forward to it.
And then I think Susan had a question. Yeah.
I just want to assure you that I've been cut off. The board is well aware of the elevator problems and care deeply about the elevator. No, but for real, I mean, I'm like not joking. I understand what a huge quality of life problem it is when they go down and there's a lot of standing around and waiting around. And we'll continue to explore solutions.
Thank you.
I once,
Oh, hi.
excuse me, all right.
Shall I say? my
About
question?
3 weeks ago,
What's going on?
Where do you want people to go? That's okay to speak from.
Okay, so we'll do magic, then we'll go to Susan.
okay, all right. About 3 weeks ago, I heard a resident from here who's been here a number of years say, "We residents are paying for the new tower." I don't think that's accurate. Can we clarify what that might mean?
I'll take a stab at that because I've had a bit of a journey on this question myself where there's multiple ways to look at it. And I remember having an early question myself about that early in this process. And I remember just mentioning, like, well, we should just keep track of it both ways. Like, we should keep track of it on a cash flow basis, and we should also keep track of it as an investment. So all of the lost revenue today and all of the money we spend on lawyers and development partners needs to be tracked as part of the investment that will be paid back by the future residents to make sure that there is a return on that investment. And I didn't really realize at the time that Christy was probably already planning to do that because magically I would go to like a future meeting a quarter or two later and there it is all laid out in the finances. You can look at it on a cash flow basis. Of course, the money that we have in the bank is paying for the lawyers that we have today. But we're keeping track of every penny to convince ourselves that when we look at the project as a whole, this project will pay for itself. And if it can't pay for itself, we would stop all, we would stop moving forward and stop, what would that be called? The dead weight loss or the sunk cost, right? So we do have some sunk costs that we've already spent that if we don't move forward, we can't get it back, and that's the risk that the board has taken. But we would not move forward unless we believed that it will pay off in the long run, and even the medium run.
So I'm going to ask Bob, because part of it, we've had, I'm sorry, where are we going? We have another, okay. Let's go to Susan, and then we'll come back.
I already brought this up earlier, but I think it's amazing that you're not bringing up this point in time when everything is liable to be completely upended. The only reference I found to it in your literature was strategies to address potential elimination of private activity bond tax exemption, which I assume is one of these things that's rolling toward us. But there's a great many possibilities. For example, with the tariffs, construction materials, there's so many options. I wish that you would address something about that.
Okay, I'm going to ask Sawgrass to address that.
Can you hear me? All right, I will stand up. That's a great question. Thank you. And yes, there are a lot of uncertainties. There are uncertainties anytime we do development, right? We can't predict the future. We know, as Kevin was saying, these projects have a long gestation period. A big part of development is really risk identification, risk avoidance, risk mitigation if we can't avoid it. So as it relates to tariffs, obviously that is on everyone's mind. We don't know what those tariffs will be, thank you, and how long they may last or what they may affect. So one of the things as a baseline is the construction contract, the guaranteed maximum price contract they will have with our design builder, Anderson, will basically fix the contract price. So if subsequent to that contract being signed, there are additional tariffs or escalation beyond what was anticipated, that's Anderson's risk to take, and they need to build that into their contract. Between today and when we sign that contract and we set that price, we obviously are subject to what may happen. And so we are very actively working with the team at Anderson to understand what are the potential impacts, how much will it affect the budget, if at all, and what does that mean to the overall financial viability of the project. So while, there is uncertainty, we are certainly monitoring those things and trying to understand the financial impact of them, as well as then making sure once we actually commit to move forward with the project, we have built-in protections for Horizon House that we're not going to be subject to those impacts. Once again, I mean, there are certain unique things that we're dealing with today, but in any development project at any time, right? Look what happened with COVID. Nobody expected COVID to happen, or look what happened when the economic downturn happened. There are always things of uncertainty that we have to deal with. That's part of the reason, as Kevin said, we deal with prudent assumptions, with adequate cushions. We try not to put things at the margin, and then we stay on top of these kind of potential issues and make sure we're considering them.
And I think the other piece to that is, there will be an update of the pricing estimate here halfway through the construction document phase, which by that point, who knows what the tariff situation is, but I assume in the next couple months here, we'll have a better idea of what's going on there. So once again, having check-in points along the way, being in constant contact with our design builder, and like I say, we will have a better sense of what that is here in the next month or two.
All right, thank you, Sawgrass. We're going to take a question from the my far left. Do we have any questions on the far left? All right, we're going to go to the Fireside Lounge.
Thank you. One sec.
On the subject of risk, I forgot who got up and talked about this, but mention was made of a specific provision of the Trump tax law that would remove financing for us. I didn't quite get that. It went by too fast.
Yes, so it's an identified risk now. Really, everything's on the table, and we're one of those, right? So there's all these different buckets that they can use to pay for the tax cut extension and the additional tax cuts they might want to do. We've been through this before in 2017 in Trump 1.0. In the initial tax bill, the full repeal of private activity bonds, which is nonprofits. So that would be it'd be private universities, health systems, senior living, et cetera, would all be repealed. That is, they couldn't issue tax-exempt debt. That was the initial proposal in 2017. We had a grassroots activists come out, and we really were able to lobby that out of the bill then, while they're going back to the well. And so we'll know more about this in the coming year. But this bill also won't be done most likely until the end of the year, at which point it'll be a challenge to react. So we're just trying to do good preparation and say, hey, that's a risk we simply can't take if everything else lines up. And this is something we're talking to with every one of our clients. And in fact, I'll say the University of Washington moved up one of their financings for a student housing transaction. It was going to be next year. It's a large transaction. They moved it up to the first half of this year for this very reason, that it could be a pay for. And to put the math to it, if they remove tax exemption for all municipal bonds, it would save the federal government $40 billion a year. And they look out a 10-year window. So they would be able to count $400 billion and they'll pay for the tax cuts, right? That's how the math works. And they're going to do this with everything. And then see how it lines up, and there'll be a lot of horse trading in Congress. And of course, there is a one-seat majority in the House. So there's going to be a lot of horse trading. That is a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, that did make me feel better to know that we'd like run up to this point before, and then it didn't happen. But we're obviously watching it very closely. And the thing we have the most control over is to go to financing soon. So the faster we can go to financing, the more sure we are that we can get it. If it goes past the first of the year, that's when this uncertainty comes into play. That's another one that, like, I've heard that 10 times, but if people have follow-up questions on that and, you know, any of those words were not familiar to you, please ask a follow-up question.
Thank you. All right, we are going to go to the center for questions. Do we have any more questions in the center? I think Ned has a question, and then Gussie has a question. Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's a word that's been missing in all of this. I came to Horizon House because it was a resident-driven community. And before you address that, that was something that differentiated us from our competitors in the near area. I can't remember the name of starting with Madison, whatever it is, down by Lake Union. I can't remember the name. And then the one over here. What is it? No, not Skyline. I always have trouble. But each of those, I have friends from all of them. And they each offer something special. We were a resident-driven community. I was a good friend of Sylvia Odom, who was one of those people. We're hearing, and I don't take it personally, but this was a meeting from management telling us what was going to happen. You lose something when you don't listen to them. And I'm going to shut up and let you answer.
All right, so I am going to hand that response over to Mike Meekum.
Thank you. Great question. I was thinking about this earlier in the context of the strategic planning that we went through when I joined during COVID. And I'll just speak for myself personally, and we'll get to your question. For me, my North Star, as we went through strat planning, was resident culture and community. And I would ask that question in the morning, in the evening, during my entire 4 years as vice president, president, and leading the strategic planning community. As we went through strat planning, and as Bob alluded to, we took a long look at expansion, build, and within that, contiguous build, or affiliation. And I would ask myself the question, you know, what is in the best interest? What's the North Star of this place? And what was our Uber goal? Our goal. The goal was to preserve and nurture that which makes Horizon House special, which is culture and community. And so we landed on
resident-driven community. Resident-driven community?
Yeah, resident-driven culture and community, because we believe that that is what makes us special and different, differentiated, and that's what, frankly, we're evangelizing and selling today in the marketplace. Okay, so what we've embarked upon this journey with the West Tower was, in our humble opinion, that which we could do to best preserve and nurture what makes this special. Well, we was the board, which was, and specifically the strategic planning community, which was made up of both board members and residents. And ultimately, when we finished that process, we landed upon building or expanding, like we've done 6 times over the history of Horizon House. And we finished the strategic planning process, knowing that that was what we were going to do. And when we were done with strategic planning, it was actually a resident who was part of that committee who came to us and said, I have an idea in terms of how to build and expand our community. It was Jim Fitzgerald. And that was really the genesis for moving on with the West Tower.
I would like to weigh in on that also. You know, the term resident-driven community was always misunderstood by residents here. And I talked to Mike Ostrom a lot about that. What it was meant to be was residents ran their own programs, their entertainment, raised the money, and decided how we wanted to live. But we did not make the management decisions. We did not, we have a CEO and we have a board, and that's, our job is not to make the financial and the management decisions. I think this place is unique in that we're always consulted. There are small group sessions. We may not agree with what's going on, but we have no authority to change that other than to weigh in and say how we feel. And everyone always listens. The board listens, Erica listens, but think about resident-driven as us running our programs, Jennifer raising the money for us to do that, and us living our lives in that way, but not running Horizon House. We are not owners. We are residents.
Thank you, Deanna. All right, I'm going to take questions from my right.
Fairsies.
Is it turned on? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Probably your very best marketing team is sitting in these green chairs facing the front of the room. And if I were a prospective client, I would want to hear from a satisfied customer, not a salesman.
Yeah. I actually did some secret shopping recently with a friend, and I will say the sales department does an amazing job. But what they're selling is the contact with all of you. And Erica and I went and met the mayor this morning, and we were even pitching to him. I didn't say, like, come live in Horizon House, but that's what I was thinking, and it was the subtext of all the stories that we were telling him about what makes this place really special are the special people that live here. Sorry.
I do want to add, resident marketing is an absolute part of the strategy, and we've had wonderful residents attend events, have conversations, meals with prospective residents, but we do need to tool the residents and how to get out there. And Alex gave everybody their first challenge, posting on your social media or sending an email to your friend group. So you are right. Thank you for continuing to lift that up. All right, I am going to go to do we have another one over here? Okay. Okay, we'll have a question over here, then we go out to the Fireside Lounge. Marcia. Sorry, Marcia, go ahead.
So I would like to address your question, Gussie, because we are a resident-driven community, as Deanna expressed about our own programs, but we do not have, as residents, fiduciary responsibility for the lives and the property of all of the people who live here. The board does have that fiduciary responsibility, and therefore an obligation to make decisions that sometimes are not 100% popular. So, but I think it is important to differentiate between the board and its responsibilities and the residents' council and its responsibilities.
Thank you, Marcia. All right, got Mona?
Yes, we are a resident-driven activity community, but what is going to happen when the Monday market is gone because the building will be torn down? That is our income for our activities.
All right. You want to talk? No, I want to make sure boards hear about it. Bob, I'm going to toss this to you because we just not okay.
I can
All
make
right,
it. I can
go ahead,
make
'cause
it.
we just approved the endowment spending today, which does include.
I know I have voted on, at least in the spirit, I don't know if we actually decided the amount, but I know that we have set aside money to continue to fund the activities as if the Monday market was in its full glory. And we're going to continue to operate it, but we realize that the scale might be different during this transition period.
Go ahead, Gary.
Gary?
Philanthropy Committee understood the need for the Monday market and that the revenue to fund all of the activities. And the board has made a commitment to fund the same budget that would have been raised from the proceeds from the Monday market. In fact, today, the board just approved for this year $91,000, and that's $91,000 a year for 5 years in order to fund the activities that would be funded by the impact of loss of revenue from the Monday market. So, and that comes, the Philanthropy Committee's aware of that, and I think it's also really important. All that we do is to make sure that this continues, this community continues into the future. And so that not only do we have fiduciary responsibility, which we do, but we also have a strategic responsibility for the organization into the future. It's not just what's going on today or 3 years from now or 5 years from now, but someone's going to ask 10 years from now, did we have the vision to make sure that Horizon House still exists then? How about 20 years from now? So it's great. Most people are mostly concerned about what's going to happen the next year or the next 2 years or 5 years. But we're really concerned, we're looking at 10 years, we're looking at 20 years to make sure that this organization and this community continues to thrive.
All right, we are on our last question, but we want to make sure you know our board members will be sticking around, taking questions at the reception, but I want to offer the Fireside Lounge to see if they have a question in the Fireside Lounge.
No questions.
All right, one last question, anywhere in the room? Okay. We've got some, we're gonna get a mic coming.
I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. I'm going to add something to the Monday market, which is it's one of the few places where somebody can kind of show up and just do something for 2 hours once a month, every other week. And so for people who are relatively new, it provides a kind of a unique way to join and feel you're giving to the community without like bleeding. You know, so there's no quarts of blood involved. So anyway, it's the money, but it's also a vehicle that builds community. So I think that's a piece that's also almost equally important, at least in my mind.
We will have a Monday market. I will assure you, we are looking for that space right now. In March, we'll have more information, but there will be a Monday market. We know that that's the lifeblood of Horizon House in a variety of ways. And so we just, if by any chance the sales go down, we wanted to make sure that all the resident activities would be whole, but we will have a Monday market. You can bet on that.
Yeah, and even for the board members, it is a really easy thing to invite somebody to do on a Monday. We can have breakfast and then go to the Monday market, or go to the Monday market and then take someone to lunch. So I totally share your point of view that it is a really important kind of entry-level activity to be part of the community. Could squeeze in one more if anyone's dying. No? Thank you guys so much. All of the board members and Sawgrass and Ziegler will all be sticking around for the reception. So feel free to ask any of us any questions. Same thing with follow-up. And I really enjoyed being here today. Thank you guys all so much. And you got an extra 10 minutes of Q&A time for my excellent time management, Bob.